The Training of an American, Chapter 1, Part 2. One day, in his late 40s, Frank Page, big, hardy, gaunt, striding along with swinging arms like a mighty sylvan god, plunged into the forest to seek his fortune. With little capital, except his restless ambition and his physical and moral strength. Presently, he was about 20 years old. He found himself in the neighborhood of Fayetteville, and here, for several seasons, he wrung a living from the pine trees. For they furnished not only the sentiment of his life, but its sustenance. In those days, a turpentine orchard frequently gave a young man his start in life. A crew of Negroes and several thousand trees were the necessary stock in trade. The sap was collected in little boxes notched at the base of the pines, put in barrels made by Negroes on the premises, and shipped to all parts of the world. Then the trees themselves were sometimes cut down and made into lumber. If Frank Page did not find great fortune in this first venture, at least he found happiness. His business headquarters was the little town of Fayetteville, at the head of navigation on the Cape Fear River. Scottish immigrants had settled this region in the latter part of the 18th century. So Scottish were they that even in Frank Page's sojourning there, Gaelic was still spoken in certain places. These Scots, however, had become sufficiently Americanized in a couple of generations to name their central town after Lafayette, who passed through it on his famous visit in 1824. It was a Scotch family, the Barclays, that had given their own name to the settlement of Barclaysville, halfway between Fayetteville and Raleigh. One of its daughters, Esther Barclay, was famous for other reasons than the customary kiss received from Lafayette in the course of his momentous visit. She and her husband kept the tavern, the halfway house, at which the Raleigh-Fayetteville stage stopped for a night's rest and change of horses. She was celebrated for the dignity and even state with which, after her husband's death, she presided over this establishment, even in her last years. An advanced invalid and bedridden, personally receiving the most distinguished guests. Testimony to her qualities is borne by a witness whom the South once regarded as none too friendly, Frederick Law Olmsted, who visited this region and experimented with North Carolina stagecoaches and inns a few years before the Civil War, leaving his impressions in a famous book which did more to expose the real evils of the slavery system than Uncle Tom's Cabin itself. Mr. Olmsted was severe upon the untidiness of the North Carolina inn and its keeper, but he made one exception to his indictment. "I met the driver," he writes, "returning with 2 fresh horses, and at length, before 8 o'clock, reached a long 1-story cabin, which I found to be Miss Barclay's. It was right cheerful and comforting to open the door from the dark, damp, chilly night into a large room, filled with blazing light from a great fire and turpentine pine, by which 2 stalwart men were reading papers, a door opening into a background of supper table and kitchen, and a nice, stout, kindly-looking, Quaker-like old lady coming forward to welcome me. My bedroom was a house by itself, the only connection between it and the main building being a platform or gallery in front. A great fire burned here also in a broad fireplace. A stuffed easy chair had been placed before it. And this was a pine wood stage house. But genius will find its development no matter where its lot is cast. and there is as much a genius for hospitality as for poetry. Miss Barkley is a Burns in her way. This lady's daughter, also named Esther Barkley, married John Samuel Rabbiteau, a descendant of Huguenot refugees, and settled in Fayetteville, only a few miles from the inn Mr. Olmsted so appreciatively describes. Their daughter, Kate Robichaud, was in 1850 a slender, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, pink-cheeked girl of 18, and she had received a rather better education than came to most Southern girls of her day, for she had attended Peggy Eastwood's school at Raleigh and the Lewisburg Female Academy, so that, in addition to the primary branches and the needlework that represented the educational standard of the time, she had acquired a smattering of French and algebra. Kate Rabbiteau, or Catherine Francis, to give her a more formal name, also had another common taste. She was a reader of good books. Her deeply religious spirit was not incompatible with a serene and cheerful nature, a lively sense of humor, and an affectionate attitude toward most of the serious problems of life. Frank Page and Catherine Rabbiteau were married July 5th, 1849. Turpentine farming and turpentine distilling, logging, and lumbering formed their early domestic background. As soon as a particular pine field was exhausted, they would advance into a new one. In this hard first 5 years, 2 children were born, both of whom died in infancy. About 1854, Frank Page, in the search for a new material, purchased 400 acres of woods about 8 miles west of Raleigh. The great advantage of this new site, in addition to the forest, pine, oak, and sycamore, was the railroad recently built. Frank Page and his wife moved to this new location and began life anew. Within a year, August 15, 1855, a third child, a son, was born. He was christened Walter Hines Page. And that's the end of part 2.